Well,
Never heard that before.
is that a new feature? So just to, before we get started, I just want to really, really, truly thank everybody for the incredible, successful campaign that we had 2 weeks ago. I know it's it's stressful, and I asked everybody to stretch a little bit, and everybody did, and I really am very grateful for that, and that allows me to not really have to think too much about fundraising for the rest of the year. So that's a big relief, and a great thing that's going to allow us to do some, God willing, some really wonderful things this year with new, very exciting chapters ahead in the Chaim Center journey. So thank you again, and we couldn't do any of this without your help and your support. Okay, so with that, we are ready to start Parsha Unpacked, and we are on a truly fabulous and wonderful Parsha. Every Parsha is fabulous and wonderful, but this one is one of my favorites. Okay, and hopefully we'll see why. This is one of those Parshas where the very hardest part about delivering a Parsha class is choosing between which topics to go into, because there's so many different little areas, and each one of them is really fascinating and quite honestly deserves a lot more exploration and focus. Each one could really be an hour. Each could be an hour class on its own, but that's not the way we present the shir. The way we present the shir, if you're zooming in for the first time, is we try to do a little bit of an overview of the Parsha, and then we also try to go a little bit more in depth into certain areas. So the Parsha starts off, this week's Parsha starts off with the mitzvah of lighting the menorah. So there was a menorah that was, we learned about the menorah already. Let me just mute everybody, sorry. We learned about the menorah already, that there was I'm just muting everyone. You can feel free to unmute yourselves when you want to jump in. There was a menorah that stood inside of the Holy Temple, and that menorah was made out of gold. And the mitzvah, the commandment regarding the menorah, was for Aaron, or the sons of Aaron, meaning the Kohanim, to kindle the lights of that menorah every single day. So the Parsha starts off and it says, Hashem spoke to Moses, saying, speak to Aaron, that's Moshe's brother, and he's the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, and say to him, when you kindle the lamps, toward the face of the menorah shall the 7 lamps cast light. We'll see what that means soon. Aaron did so. Toward the face of the menorah he kindled its lamps, as Hashem commanded Moses. Now this is how the menorah was made, and then it goes on to explain the details of the menorah. So the first question is, and that's not my question. It's a question that Rashi comments on and notices. The question is, we break up the parshas into weekly, portions, but if you look at it in a bigger picture, there usually should be a flow or a connection between what ended last week's parsha and where this week's parsha picked up from. And that's the question that Rashi is addressing. What's the connection? The end of last week's parsha, if you were, following in shul, a little bit of a repetitive and somewhat boring last half of the parsha, is this explanation of how each and every one of the 12 tribal princes or leaders, presidents of each one of the 12 tribes brought a specific contribution to the Mishkan, to the temple, to the tabernacle, for the inauguration ceremony of the tabernacle. And it goes through, and each one brought the exact same thing, and it lists all 12 of them, and it gives you all the details of what they brought, these tremendous gifts and contributions that each one of the tribes brought, the leaders brought on behalf of their tribe. So that in a sense, every one of the Jewish people was represented by those gifts and contributions. That was how the Parsha ended last week. And then it picks up all of a sudden, kind of out of nowhere, with this mitzvah of the menorah. And Rashi's wondering, what's the connection? What's the connection between the end of last week's Parsha and this detailed description of how each and every one of the tribal leaders brought a contribution to inaugurate the Mishkan, the temple, the tabernacle, and the lighting of the menorah. So Rashi comments on that, and he says as follows. Why is this section treating of the menorah put in juxtaposition with the section dealing with the offerings of the princes? As I just told you, that was his question. And here's the answer. Because when Aaron saw the dedication offerings of the princes, Aaron was watching, right? As each one of the tribal leaders stepped up, as each one of the princes of each tribe stood up and offered a gift as a part of the inauguration to dedicate to the temple, to the Mishkan, he felt distressed. He was bummed out. He was really very, very sad because neither he nor his tribe was with them in the dedication, meaning they, Aaron and his tribe, the Kohanim, were not included in that process. They were not told to bring a contribution to the inauguration of the temple. And he felt very sad about that. He felt left out. He felt like he had missed an opportunity. So the Holy One, blessed be he, said to him, meaning God said to Aaron, don't worry, Aaron, take a deep breath, chill out. It's all good. Why? Because by your life, which is the language of an oath, God's taking an oath to Aaron. I promise you, your share, your part is of greater importance than theirs. Why? For you will kindle and set in order the menorah. You'll light you and your offspring will light the menorah every single day in the temple. So that's his consolation prize. Don't worry. I know you couldn't participate in these offerings, but the good news is I've got something even better for you. What is that? I've got the menorah. And I have a number of questions on this. Question number one, which is just sort of a side point, is it does seem a little bit strange. Here, Aaron is complaining. And you think about, with our children or with, if a teacher is working in a school or somebody with a number of people, and the kids start complaining. Hey, that's not fair. Moshe got to go to Dairy Star, and he got ice cream, and I didn't get to go. And Chani got a new bike, and I didn't get a new bike. And the kids can complain. I saw one of the other kids got something, and I didn't get this. So what do you do in that situation? You say life isn't fair, and everyone gets exactly what they need, and you move on. That's how it goes. It's not for you to worry about, kid. I know what I'm doing. I'm the parent over here, and I've got my reasons, and every kid gets what they want. So what does Hashem do over here? Hashem says, oh no, Aaron, it's okay. Don't worry. I know you feel like you were left out. I've got something even better for you. That doesn't seem like good parenting, right? If I turn to each one of my kids every time they felt left out or that they had been gypped in some way, and I told them, okay, you know what? I'll get you something better than I got for Hani or Moshe, whatever. That's not good parenting. And here Hashem is telling Aaron, don't worry. I know you're feeling left out, that you didn't get to participate in this process, in the pomp and circumstance of this inaugural contribution. But I got something even better for you. You have the menorah. So that's question number one: is what was Hashem doing over here? Why didn't Hashem just say, hey, Aaron, take it easy. Everyone plays their role. Everyone gets what they get. So that's a beautiful answer to this question. Rabbi Ephraim Goldberg in Boca Raton, Florida, he addresses this, and he says something really quite insightful, and that is that when it comes to the physical world or the material world, it's absolutely correct. Our attitude should be, we are sameach bechelko, as it says in Pirkei Avos. I'm happy with what I have. Ezu asher, who is the happy person? Who's the wealthy person? The one who is sameach bechelko. He's happy with what he has. So I shouldn't always be wanting more. And if Moshe got something, fine. Moshe got what he needs. I'll get what I need. That is the correct attitude when it comes to material and physical acquisition. But when it comes to spiritual acquisition, when it comes to spiritual growth, we shouldn't be satisfied. We should always be thirsting. We should always be yearning. We should want more. And if we see somebody else who's performing mitzvos more than we are, or with greater clarity or greater, commitment, then we should be jealous of them, of their spiritual growth, of their spiritual commitment. And we should not be sameach b'chelko. We shouldn't be satisfied with our lot when it comes to spiritual things. So what's going on over here? What's Aaron feeling left out about? He's feeling left out about this amazing opportunity to perform this wonderful spiritual process and procedure of inaugurating in the temple. He's feeling left out spiritually. So then Hashem says, that's beautiful. That gives me nachas. That is a beautiful thing. I love to see when my kids are, in a sense, competing with one another in spiritual accomplishments. So Aaron, I'm going to reward you, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to do something even greater, which is what? Lighting the menorah. And we'll see in a minute how that's even greater. But before we do, I want to just read one more Rashi to you. So we'll come back to that picture in a minute. But the actual Parsha is called Beha'Alotcha. And we translated it, if we go back to the verse, we translated the verse, speak to Aaron and say to him, when you kindle the lamps, when you light the lamps. But the truth is that's not really such a great translation, because Beha'Alotcha does not mean when you light. If you wanted to say when you light the menorah, he said kisha madlik or kisha yadlik as a menorah. When you will light the menorah, hadlakat nerot. But that's not what it says. It says Beha'Alotcha as a nerot. When you will, comes from the word aliyah. Aliyah means to go up, right? When you make aliyah to Israel, you're going up, hopefully. Okay, so Beha'Alotcha means when you cause the lights to go up. That's what it means. When you cause the lights to go up. And that's a strange way of presenting this idea. So Rashi says, when you make the lights go up, what does it mean? Because a flame, as we know, always rises upward. It's an expression of ascending. Okay, so what are you supposed to do? When you light the menorah, you're supposed to light the menorah in such a way that that you should light the menorah until the light is able to go up on its own. Now they talk about this idea as being the foundation of teaching and educating and raising children. The goal of any teacher, the goal of any Rebbe, the goal of any Morah, the goal of any parent should be to try to create a self-sustaining spiritual reality for their child, for their students, to light them and to ignite them and to inspire them and to light their light until that light can ascend by its own. Okay, you don't want your students or your children to be relying upon you forever for their spiritual growth. You want them ultimately to be able to ascend and to ignite on their own. Now, there's a second part of this Rashi where he says, furthermore, our rabbis derived from here that there was a step in front of the candelabrum upon which the priest stood while preparing the lights. And if you look over here, that this picture depicts that very well. Okay, so that's what it means. Beha'Alotcha, that's the other interpretation when you go up the steps to light the menorah. And Rabbi Goldberg pointed out that these two things go together, very much go together. How so? We want to inspire our children. We want to inspire our students. We want to inspire them to the point where their light, their spiritual light, will ascend on its own, where they won't be relying upon me any longer to be able to elevate them. How do I do that? The only way for me to do that is for me to step it up also. I have to ascend. I have to be the role model. There's no such thing in Judaism as do what I say, not what I do. That does not fly in Judaism. As parents, as teachers, as role models, as spiritual guides, we always have to step it up ourselves. Be that person, be that role model for our children, model for the people that we're influencing, what it means to be grown spiritually yourself. Model for your grandchildren. If you want your grandchildren to grow spiritually, let them see a Bubby and Zadie who are putting their money where their mouth is. Let them see a Bubby and Zadie who themselves are stepping it up and committing and investing in their Jewish life and in their Jewish growth. So these two things to go together. We have to elevate and inspire those under our influence, our children and our students and our grandchildren, whoever, so that they can be spiritually great on their own. And the way that we do that is by stepping it up ourselves, by ascending ourselves and being that role model. One more comment that I want to discuss over here. This idea that Aaron was feeling kind of bummed out. Aaron was feeling bummed out that all these Nesiim, all these tribal leaders, the presidents of each of the tribes, that they got to participate in this really fantastic ceremony, and Aaron didn't get to participate, and he was feeling left out. And Hashem says, "That's beautiful. I see that you want to grow spiritually. You know what, Aaron? Your role is going to be even greater than their role. How so? I am going to give you the menorah. The menorah is going to be your mitzvah, and you and your children are going to light that menorah in the temple, and that's going to be your special mitzvah." So the question that I have, that everybody has, is what is it about Aaron and the menorah and the role that he's playing here that is greater, that is more significant, that is more important in some ways than the role of the inauguration of the starting up of the dedication of the Mishkan? So what the answer I'm going to share with you on this, there are many answers to this. The famous classic answer from Nachmanides, from the Ramban, which I'm not going to focus on today, but it has to do with the fact that really it's not about, he wasn't referring to the menorah in the temple, he was referring to the Hanukkah menorah, and that Aaron's descendants would be the one that would fight the Hanukkah battle, which is an interesting interpretation, but I don't want to focus on that for now. But I want to focus on the interpretation or the explanation from a great rabbi who died on the very, very last day before the liberation of the Holocaust. His name was Rabbi Yisachar Shlomo Teichtel. And I'll tell you about him some other time, but he was a fascinating and very prominent figure in my life. In fact, I'll just show you over here. If you look in my office, I have 4 pictures over here. And I have 4 pictures. One is Rabbi Hirsch, one is Rav Kook, one is Rav Noach Weinberg, and the 4th one on the right is Rabbi Yisachar Shlomo Teichtel. And one day I'll tell you why he made it, so to speak, onto the wall of my office. But that's not the story for now. So for now, I'll just tell you what he says. He asks the question. He says, "What's greater? What's more remarkable? What's more noteworthy or more deserving of praise and respect? Creating something brand new, or maintaining something for an extended period of time?" And I'll give you an example, right? What's more awesome? What's more impressive? Creating a brand new startup company, okay? Or keeping that startup company going and growing and thriving and building for decades? Or another way of putting it is, what's more impressive? Giving birth to a child, or raising that child, investing in that child, building that child for the next 20, 30, or in many cases, forever years, okay? Or another example, what's more awesome? What's more impressive? Having a wedding, or developing and building and investing in a marriage for 75 years that grows and gets better and more powerful, more wonderful as the years go by. So Rabbi Teichtel explains that creating something, although creating something and initiating something can be a wonderful achievement and accomplishment, but it's not the same as nurturing, tending to something, investing in it day in and day out, building it and maintaining it and sustaining it. That, he says, is a much greater human achievement. It's much harder, day in and day out, the sweat, the investment, when the inspiration is gone, persevering through the difficulties, the longevities, right? We know there are millions of startup companies, but only a few of them last. Only a few of them persevere, right? We know that there are many people get married, but not every marriage survives. And even the ones that do are not always thriving, because it's a lot harder to maintain and to sustain something. So being able to do that is a greater accomplishment. And he says the Mishkan, the temple, the portable temple, is no different. He said the Nesiim, the leaders, the tribal princes, the ones who inaugurated the Mishkan on that day by bringing those gifts, they created the startup called the Mishkan. They got it going. They inaugurated it. They put it into action. The startup, they incorporated and created the corporation called the Mishkan, this new startup entity. But Aaron's role was much more significant because he sustained it. How so? What was the purpose of the Mishkan? The purpose of the Mishkan was nothing short of divine presence, the Shekhinah, dwelling in the midst of the Jewish people. Dwelling in the midst of the Jewish people, creating a merkaz, a central location where all of the Jewish people could be united together as one people, as one Am, together in the service of Hashem and connection to their Creator. That was the purpose of the Mishkan, a unifying entity within the Jewish people that would bring all the groups and all the disparate groups of the Jewish people together and into one. Okay, so that was the role of Aaron, because the princes, the Nesiim, they inaugurated the Mishkan, started up, very exciting. They brought all these wonderful sacrifices, but Aaron was not included in that. And he was dejected and he was sad. He was crestfallen until God came along and said, oh, no. Your role is going to be much bigger. Okay. Now think about this. What destroyed the temple? Why is there no temple today? Soon it's going to be Rosh Chodesh Tammuz, and then it's going to be Av, and we're going into the summer months, and we're going to be mourning over the fact that we have no temple and any longer in Jerusalem. The temple was destroyed because of baseless hatred, because of sinat chinam, because the Jewish people could not stay together. They didn't respect each other. They didn't honor one another. They didn't unify with one another. When the Jewish people are not unified, there is no temple. There cannot be a temple. God's presence cannot exist when there's discord and when there's fighting among the Jewish people. Aaron's role, what was Aaron's role? What was the unique quality of this individual called Aaron? Well, we know in Ethics of Our Fathers in Pirkei Avot, it tells us that, it says, Hillel says, that everyone should try to be like a disciple of Aaron. What does it mean to be a disciple of Aaron? Ohev Shalom, love peace. Verodev Shalom, pursue peace. Ohev Esabrios, love people, love mankind, carve from the Torah, bring them closer to spirituality. Those were Aaron's qualities. Those were his traits. That's who he was. He was the unifying figure. He brought everybody together. So his role in the perpetuation, in the sustenance, the maintaining, the continuity of the Mishkan was much greater. He kept it going. The Nesiim, they inaugurated it, but Aaron kept it going. How? By keeping peace, by keeping people unified. And now, how does the menorah symbolize that? So if in the menorah, we said about the menorah that the interesting thing about the menorah is that I highlighted, if you see how I did that over there, I highlighted the on the right-hand side, you can see like a close-up. It said, we saw in the beginning, it said that, you know what, let me go back and read you what it said. It said, toward the face of the menorah, he kindled its lamps. What does that mean? Towards the face of the menorah, he kindled its lamps. It means, the commentaries explain, the Talmud explains that each candle that he lit faced towards the center. So the three on the left, if you can see this picture, he lit them on the farthest right side of the candle. You can see where the flames are, where the arrows are. The three on the right, he lit them on the farthest left side of the candle, facing the middle. Everything faced the middle. All 6 candles were pulled toward the center candle. Okay, what does this symbolize? This symbolizes something very powerful and very important in our day. You have people on the left. You have people on the right. And I don't mean just politically, but I do mean politically, and I mean spiritually, and I mean in every way, right? The Jewish people, we don't all look at things the same way. We're not supposed to look at things the same way. We're individual human beings. We have our own soul. We have our own mind. Everyone is going to look at things differently. You're going to have a big spectrum politically, spiritually in the Jewish people. And that's okay. And you know what? It's all unified. It all leans towards the center representing the Almighty, our Creator, the unifying figure, the fact that the Torah unifies us. What's going on? Whoa, hold on a second. That was weird. I was getting some weird stuff over there. The fact that the Torah unifies us and Hashem unifies us in the center. So if everything is drawn towards the center, it's okay to be on the left. It's okay to be on the right, as long as it doesn't create discord. If the Jewish people, God forbid, fall into discord and disharmony because of their different views and their different approaches to Judaism or to life, then we have disunity, we have discord, and we have lack of shalom, and we have the destruction of the temple. Okay, somebody is doing something on their screen, and it's messing up the screen. So if you're doing that, please stop. Okay, so that's the idea of the menorah. That's what the menorah represents, and the menorah represents that idea, and that is why Aaron was given this mitzvah to symbolize this very idea that the Jewish people have to stay unified. And that's why his role, his part is greater than everybody else's. Now, one last comment about the menorah, because the menorah is not our topic for tonight, even though we just spent about a half an hour talking about it. And that is that, as we said, all the candles on the menorah tilt towards the center. There's a nice Hasidic idea that, what does this represent? This represents the fact that every day of the week either leads up to or draws its energy from Shabbos. So for example, on the left, you have Wednesday, and then you have Thursday, and then you have Friday. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are all tilting towards the middle. What's the middle? Shabbos. We think of Shabbos as being the end of the week. We need to rethink that. Shabbos is the middle of the week, according to one way of understanding. Wednesday and Thursday and Friday lead up to Shabbos. Starting Wednesday, I'm anticipating Shabbos. I'm already talking about what are we going to serve at the Shabbos meal. I'm already maybe starting to prepare some Divrei Torah by Thursday for sure. I'm starting to think about what I want to focus on, the discussions that I want to have at my Shabbos table. By Friday, I'm definitely all in on Shabbos, getting ready, preparing the melodies, the smells. Everything is already echoing from the Shabbos that's about to happen. And then we have Shabbos. And then what happens? Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, you're still riding on that Shabbos. You're still feeling the energy of that Shabbos. You can still taste the cholent and the herring in your mouth, literally sometimes, on Sunday and Monday and Tuesday. You can still remember the Divrei Torah, the words of Torah that you spoke about at your table, or the precious moments that you had with Hashem or with somebody in a quiet moment on Shabbos, and they're still charging you up. So that's the idea that Shabbos is the middle of the week, and everything leads. The first three, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, lead up. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday take their energy from, and that's another important symbolism of the menorah. Okay, we got to move on, and we will. So the next thing that I want to point out is in the Parsha is this very, very interesting story of what we call Pesach Sheni, Passover Take 2. What's the story? Let's read it. There were some men who were unclean by reason of a corpse. Meaning, what does that mean? That there were two individuals that had come into contact with a dead body, either because they were carrying the bones of Joseph out of Egypt to be buried in the land of Israel, or because there's two opinions, or because there was a dead body that no one recognized, and these two people tended to the dead body to give it a proper burial. For whatever reason, they came into contact with a corpse. They were unclean, and they were not able to offer the Passover sacrifice on the day of Passover, on the 14th day of Nisan, because of this reality that they were in. Okay? Appearing that same day before Moses and Aaron, these men said to him, "Unclean though we are by reason of a corpse, why must we be debarred from presenting Hashem's offering at its set time with the rest of the Israelites? Lama nigara is the language in Hebrew. Why do we lose out? Why should we lose out on the mitzvah just because we were impure? That's not cool. We're not going to be able to bring the Korban Pesach. We're not going to be able to participate in this incredibly holy spiritual mitzvah of bringing the Korban, participating in Pesach this year." And they're very bummed. Okay. And Hashem, what happens? Hashem says, okay, Hashem speaks to Moses and saying, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when any of you or your posterity who are defiled by a corpse or on a long journey would offer a Passover sacrifice to Hashem, shall they offer in the second month on the 14th day of the month at twilight. They shall eat it with unleavened bread, etc., etc., etc. This is known as Pesach Sheni, Pesach, Passover take 2, exactly a month later, not in the month of Nisan, but in the month of Iyar, on the 14th day of Iyar. If you could not bring your Passover, if you couldn't participate in Passover offering because you were impure or because you were somewhere far away and you couldn't do it, you get a second chance. It's an amazing idea. What is going on over here? How does this fit into the whole theme of the Parsha? We'll come back to it. Stay tuned. Okay, next. I'm not including everything in the Parsha because there's too much to unpack, but one of the next things that we find out about in the Parsha, which I think is really, really interesting, is the clouds and how the clouds were responsible. They were literally like the first GPS system, God positioning system, that led the Jewish people in the desert. How would the Jewish people know when they were traveling for 40 years in the desert when to pick up and where to go and what direction to go in and where to stop and where to pack up camp and where to, keep going? And how did they know? So these clouds, these miraculous clouds, the Ananei HaKavod, they led them and they guided them. But look at the detail that the Torah goes into over here. I'm going to read this quickly. On the day that the tabernacle was set up, the Mishkan was inaugurated, right? The cloud covered the tabernacle, the tent of the pact. And in the evening, it rested over the tabernacle in the likeness of fire until morning. It was always so. The cloud covered it, appearing as fire by night. And whenever the cloud lifted from the tent, the cloud would lift up. The Israelites would set out accordingly. And at the spot where the cloud settled, the Israelites would make camp. Very simple. Okay, we get it. Got it. You don't need to say anything else. I totally get it. The cloud would pick up, it would go, the Jewish people would start going, the cloud would stop, and the Jewish people would land. But then detail. At a command of Hashem, the Israelites broke camp. At a command of Hashem, they made camp. They remained encamped as long as the cloud stayed over the tabernacle. We get that. When the cloud lingered over the tabernacle many days, the Israelites observed the Lord's mandate and did not journey on. Okay, got it. At such time as the cloud rested over the tabernacle, but for a few days, they remained encamped at a command of the Lord and broke camp at the command of the Lord. When the cloud stayed from evening until morning, they broke camp as soon as the cloud lifted in the morning, day or night. Whenever the cloud lifted, they would break camp, whether it was 2 days or a month or a year. Sounds like my bubby talking over here. How long the days lingered over the tabernacle? The Israelites remained encamped and did not set out. Only when it lifted did they break camp. On a sign from Hashem, they made the camp. On a sign from Hashem, they broke the camp. They observed Hashem's mandate at Hashem's bidding through Moses. Does that not sound kind of superfluous over there? A lot of words seem unnecessary. Listen to what the Ramban Nachmanides tells us about this. Amazing. He says, the reason why the Torah goes to such elaborate length to describe all of these ongoing, sometimes it was a day, sometimes it was 2 days, sometimes it was a month, sometimes it was a year, and the cloud would stay and they would stay, and the cloud would go and they would go. He explains like this. He says, this is an amazing praise of the Jewish people, because sometimes they would arrive, the cloud would arrive, they'd be traveling and the cloud would arrive at a miserable, God-forsaken place. The Wi-Fi was terrible, and it's just no one wanted to stay there. And what would happen? Oh no, please, no, not here. Oh no, the cloud would stop, and the Jewish people were like, oh really? Here in the Red Roof Inn? Come on, the Waldorf's just up the road. Can we go a little further? I happen to like the Red Roof Inn, but that's just me. Okay, so anyway, what would they do? They would stop. If the cloud stopped, they would stop. Even if it was a completely undesirable place, they showed discipline, they were controlled, and they stayed. And sometimes what would happen, Ramban Nachmanides explains, the cloud would go and they would go to would land in a beautiful place, 5-star resort, amazing, and then they would be, oh, this is great. Maybe we'll get to chill out here for a couple of weeks. The pool's gorgeous. It's just amazing. I have a get to wear one of those, robes from the bathroom, everything, mini bar. This is good stuff over here. Hopefully we'll get to stay here for a few weeks, maybe a month. What would happen? Sometimes the next morning, oh no, are you kidding me? The cloud would pick up, we're out of here. And they would carry on. Sometimes it would literally be one day. Do you understand what that means? They would arrive, they would set up the Mishkan. Do you know what it meant to set up the Mishkan? The work involved in setting up the Mishkan, they would set it all up. They would unpack everything, go to sleep, wake up in the morning, and the cloud would pick up. And they'd have to pack up the Mishkan again, fall back into their assembly, and march again. Al pi Hashem yachanu v'al pi Hashem yisa'u. At the sign of Hashem, they would break camp. At the sign of Hashem, they would travel. So this is an amazing, amazing lesson. And if you think about it in contemporary terms, our whole lives are really a journey. Just like this journey that the Jewish people were taking in the Midbar, in the desert. And Hashem's leading us today on this journey, just like he was leading our ancestors 3,300 and however many years ago. And the question is, are we open to the journey? Are we willing to go where the clouds lead us? Are we willing to go wherever Hashem is going to take us? Are we willing to follow the cloud, even when we think maybe it's not time to go, or maybe it's too early, or maybe it's not going to lead us to the right place? Are we open? Are we open to letting Hashem lead us and guide us? And what are the clouds? The clouds could be anything. The clouds could be the global situation. The clouds could be a situation locally in our community or a personal situation in our family, whatever it is. But there are times when we have to just put our trust in Hashem, our emunah, our bitachon, our belief, our faith, our trust in Hashem, and al pi Hashem yachanu, al pi Hashem yisa'u, and break camp based on a sign from Hashem, and set up camp based on a sign from Hashem. And this is a major, major lesson for us to think about, ponder. We could talk about this point all night, but we're not going to. So let's move on. Fine. I want to share something unbelievable. Okay, this to me is just really completely amazing, and I hope you'll find it to be also. So let me just move on to the next slide over here. There was a rabbi who I'm sure many of you have heard of. His name was Rabbi Dr. Norman Lamb. He died. His yahrzeit was, I think, like last week maybe. He died sadly in his 90s. From COVID, and his wife died like a month earlier, I think, from COVID. They both passed away. Very, very tragic. He was the dean for many, many years. He was the dean, the chancellor of Yeshiva University, and he was a great formative thinker and rabbi of the 21st century in America. Very important figure. I just put this quote over here because I love this quote. Dr. Norman Lamb, this has nothing to do with our topic, but it's a great quote from a sermon in 1971. The purpose of Torah is neither some kind of arbitrary spiritual exercise, nor the beating of man into submission in order to aggrandize the divine ego. Rather, Torah is the divine instrument for man's spiritual welfare and fulfillment. The Torah is God's formula for man's moral development. The prescriptions may be difficult. They may entail discipline and renunciation, but the purpose of Torah and commandments is the good of mankind. I feel like that's a quote that we should all memorize. That's just an amazing quote. Okay, so Rabbi Dr. Norman Lamb. So he gave a sermon on June 4th, 1966 in the Jewish Center in New York on Parshas Beha'Alotcha. And the reason why I know this is because the YU website has an archives of all of his sermons. This is literally a photocopy of a typed up sermon that he wrote on his typewriter with spelling mistakes and everything. It's amazing. But he's describing in the beginning, he's talking about the philosophy of modern Orthodoxy, because YU, Yeshiva University, was sort of the leading force in modern Orthodoxy in America. And as the chancellor and as the head of Yeshiva University, he was an opponent, a proponent of modern Orthodoxy, one of the great modern Orthodox leaders. And he said, he said the philosophy of modern Orthodoxy is having I think I put the quote here actually. Okay, we'll come back to that. Is having a total commitment to halacha, to Jewish law, total commitment to Jewish law, while living in this world and practicing it fully, participating in it fully, culturally, economically, and politically. That is modern Orthodoxy in a sentence, according to Dr. Lamb. Fully committed to halacha. There's no flexibility. I'm all in on halacha, but at the same time, I'm fully participating in this world. He was very opposed to the idea of withdrawal from the world and a refusal to participate in contemporary life. He did not believe that this was a viable philosophy for Jewish Orthodoxy and Jewish people in our time. So at the same time, though, he would often caution that this is a tightrope, and we have to be very careful. The first part is the most important part: total commitment to halacha. He would say we must never lose who we are in the world. Once we enter into the world and participate in the world culturally, economically, and politically, we can't lose who we are. We can't be overly impressed with the secular culture to the point where we lose who we are. That was his focus of his sermon. Now, to draw out the idea, he mentioned on something which is in this parsha, which is unusual. Not only unusual, it's unique. It's not found anywhere else in the Torah. So there's a line, 2 verses in the Torah. We read these 2 verses every time we take out the Torah, and we say like this: when the ark was to set out, this is in our parsha, Moses would say, "Arise, Hashem, may your enemies be scattered and may your foes flee before you." And when it halted, he would say, "Return, Hashem, you who are Israel's myriads of thousands." Okay? Or in Hebrew, as we're familiar, Vayihi ben so ha'aron vayomer Moshe, Kuma Hashem v'yanusu, mistanecha v'panecha v'nuchu yomar, Shuva Hashem ruvos alfei Yisrael. We say that every time we take the Torah out of the ark and every time we put it back in. Now, look carefully over here, and you will see something that does not exist anywhere else in the entire Torah, nowhere else. And that is these 2 symbols. What are these 2 symbols? They are backwards nuns. In other words, if you flip those around, you will see that they are the letter nun. Okay, I'll give you an example of a letter nun. If you look over here, right down there, that letter is a nun, but that's a normal nun. Okay, that's a forward nun. These nuns are backwards, and it's incredibly unusual. Let's see if I can get rid of this thing now. It's not incredibly unusual. It doesn't exist anywhere else in the Torah. What is going on with these backwards nuns? And there's a lot, believe me, a lot to talk about the backwards nuns. But I want to focus on what Rabbi Lamb had to say about these backwards nuns. He said an amazing thing. There's a medrash. The medrash says something which is so cryptic, so hard to understand, and so shocking. The medrash says, the Almighty will redeem Israel and bring Mashiach by virtue of these inverted nuns. What does that mean? What is it about these nuns? What's the power of these 2 nuns that has the power to bring Mashiach and redeem the Jewish people? So let me tell you what Rabbi Lamb said. Amazing. Rabbi Lamb said that the word nun means 2 things. It means this letter, right? It means the letter in the alphabet that follows mem and precedes samach, okay? But it also means something else in Hebrew, and that is it means fish. The word nun means fish. The word dog means fish, and there's another word in Hebrew and Aramaic for fish, and that is nun. So these are called the nunim hafuchim, the backwards nuns. The backwards nuns. So he said, what do these backwards nuns represent? He says these backward nuns represent a fish, because a nun is a fish in Hebrew, that is able to swim backwards, upstream, against the tide, against the current, against the tendencies and norms of their surroundings. These backwards nuns are supposed to be symbolic of fish that can swim upstream. Now look what he writes. And we're just going to read his words because they're just so beautiful. So I'm going to read for a while and just read you what Rabbi Lamb has to say. The authentic Jew must be able to dissent, to keep apart, to be unpopular if necessary, to oppose the times, to swim upstream. A man who cannot swim upstream cannot affirm his own independent judgment against the mob. Wow. Hold on 1 second, sorry. When others, for instance, consider it a good style to indulge in uninhibited and unrestrained lavishes, whether in the pagan ornateness of the funeral or the vulgar exhibitionism of the gala bar mitzvah, we must not fear to affirm our upstream mentality, to assert our insistence upon simplicity and the emphasis upon the spiritual and the religious. Whenever we find society in violation of the sacred ideals of Judaism, we must become the nunim hafuchim, the backwards nuns, the fish that can swim upstream, those who are willing to go upstream and not downstream. We must do so even if we are excoriated, even if the pagans bear us enmity because of it. The upstream tradition of Judaism also means to dare to be alone. True religious distinction comes not when it is easy to say, be religious, but when one's loyalty is tested in the crucible of heroism. That is why profound religious thinkers and philosophers, from Professor Whitehead to Rabbi Soloveitchik, speak so often of loneliness as a major component of religious thought and experience. To be different, to go against the tide, often leaves man with a feeling of aloneness. But that is what it makes man worthy and life worthwhile. Concerning the Nunim Hafuchim, Rashi declares that these special symbols come to show that she'ein zeh mekoma. Let me just pause here and explain. What Rashi says is that those nuns, those backwards nuns, are meant to be like brackets. They're meant to bracket those two verses in the Torah and to tell you that they don't really belong here, they belong somewhere else. We'll talk about in a minute why the Torah would do that, why the Torah would put two brackets, put two verses in those brackets that don't really belong here, they belong somewhere else. But let's leave that point aside for a minute. Rashi says that this is coming to show that she'ein zeh mekomo. This is not the proper place for this passage. The passage about the Torah, the Ark, doesn't belong here. And listen to what he says. Indeed so. Any place is rarely the right place for the Ark of the Torah. How beautifully Rashi hits upon an eternal and tragic theme, the unfortunate quality of being out of place that so often characterizes truth and dignity. As a people of Torah, we have been declared exiles and foreigners. She'ein zeh mekomo. This is not our place in almost every land on this globe. Jews who today remain loyal to Torah often have that feeling, and they're correct, that they can never find their proper makom, their proper place, even in normal Jewish society today. This is then the meaning for us of the inverted letters. We must never swallow Western civilization whole. We must never forget that it was Western civilization that produced the obscene execration called Auschwitz. The nation that gave us Auschwitz was the most advanced in the world, scientifically, technologically, and culturally too. Now, this does not mean that music and culture and science and engineering are treif. It does not mean that we can or should resign from Western civilization. It does mean that we must keep somewhat aloof, that we must adopt a critical stance and not embrace it blindly. It means we must exercise dissent and criticism, intelligence, and judgment. It's amazing, amazing, amazing. And he finishes off by saying, this is what the Medrash meant when it said that God would bring Messiah by virtue of the inverted nunim, nuns. That Jewish vision of redemption is that we finally will be true to ourselves. When the Jewish people will be the fish that can swim upstream, that is when we will merit to see the redemption and see Mashiach come. That is Rabbi Lamb's incredible, magnificent point over here. And I want to just continue a little bit longer over here on the Nuns. So I mentioned to you that Rashi, and here's the Rashi I was referring to before, that Rashi says, what's the purpose of those Nuns? What's the purpose of those backwards letters that you don't find anywhere else in the Torah? So he says, Hashem made for this section dividing marks, the inverted Nuns, in front and behind, in order to indicate that this is not its proper place. That's what we said. Okay, it'd be more fitting for it to be somewhere else. Forget that. Now, but why then is it written here? Okay, if this is not the proper place, we get it now. The backwards Nuns, they look like brackets. They set these two verses apart to tell us that they don't really belong here. They belong 50 verses earlier. Fine. But then what are they doing here? Why does Hashem put them here if this is not their place? Put them where they belong. You're Hashem. You can do that. So he says, in order to make a break between one tragic narrative and that of another tragic narrative. Let me explain. What follows this in the Parsha is the Jewish people complaining that they no longer get their food for free, which they used to get, which didn't really mean for free. It means that they used to get it without having to perform mitzvos, and now they have to perform mitzvos in order to get their food. And they're complaining and they're kvetching, and it's a very bad, low moment. That's what happens afterwards. To make a break between the low moment, the tragic narrative before and the tragic narrative after, Hashem takes these verses, brackets them to tell us they don't belong here, and drops them over here, cut and paste, and drops them in the middle of these two stories of tragic narrative. But the question is, what was the tragic narrative right before? And it's not so clear. What happened right before? Right before it says, V'yisu mehar Hashem derech shloshes yamim. They marched from the mountain of God. This is talking about Mount Sinai. The Jewish people were camped on Mount Sinai. They were there for a long time. They were receiving, what were they doing there? They foot of Mount Sinai. They were receiving the Torah. They were receiving the mitzvos, commandment after commandment after commandment. And they were sitting there. And then it was time for them to go. And when it came time for them to go, it says they marched off the mountain. And the Talmud describes the way they left in the following way. Ketinok haborech mibeis hasefer. The same way a kid runs out of school on that last day of school, when it's all over, the whole year is over, and the summer begins, and you run out the door of that school, and you're so happy, and you kick the door on the way out, and you never want to see it again, or not at least for 3 months. That's how the Jewish people left Mount Sinai. There's a problem there, right? Because what were they doing at Mount Sinai? They were receiving the Torah. They were receiving the commandments. And it's very interesting, by the way, there was another time when it says that the Jewish people traveled, but there it says that Moshe forced them to travel. They were reluctant. They didn't want to go. When was that? When they were in the sea, after the sea split and all of the Egyptians drowned in the sea, it says that Moshe had to force them out. Why? Because they were raking it in. I think we spoke about this in Parshas Bishalach. They were raking it in because the Egyptians adorned their horses with jewels and gold. And they were, each one was getting rich, and Moshe, let's go. And they didn't want to go. And let's go. They didn't want to go. And finally, Moshe had to push him out. But not here. When they're on the mountain receiving Hashem's Torah and the mitzvos, and it says, Hashem says, okay, now it's time to go. They're like, let's get out of here. Enough is enough. 6:13. If we stay longer, it might be 6:14. Who knows what that one's going to look like? And they bailed. They left. They took off. That was the tragic episode before the Nuns. Then there was the tragic episode after the Nuns, and God did not want those two stories to read back to back in the Torah. So he took another section of the Torah, bracketed them with these backwards Nuns, cut those two verses, pasted them over here to separate from the two stories. Fine. Okay. Now with the few minutes that we have left, and let's just say we'll finish in 10 minutes at the most. Okay. I want to know, is there a theme? Is there an overriding theme that unifies a lot of or all of this Parsha? We had the story of the Menorah. If you remember, Aaron was feeling very sad that he didn't get to participate in the offerings of the princes. And then Hashem rewards him and gives him his own special mitzvah, the mitzvah of the Menorah. And then we had Pesach Sheni, Passover Take 2. These people were bummed out that they didn't get to participate in the mitzvah of Passover. And Hashem said, guess what? New mitzvah in the Torah called Passover Take Two. And then the Torah describes the way the Jewish people traveled in the desert. And finally, these backwards nuns and this whole story of how the Jewish people bailed off the mountain as quickly as they could when the time came. So what's the theme? I think to me, it seems that there's a theme in this parsha. And the theme is, what is a mitzvah? What is a mitzvah? Go out in the street and ask people, what is a mitzvah? Most people will answer, a good deed. Okay? Somebody who's a little bit more knowledgeable will say, a commandment, which is true. That's what a mitzvah is, a commandment. But the mitzvahs are not a long, endless list of do's and don'ts. Do this, do this, do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Why? It doesn't matter. Here's the list. Do as I say. That's not what the mitzvahs are. By the way, that's what the previous generation, the father's generation in America was told by their parents. It's no wonder that most of them, when they had the opportunity, the first opportunity they could, they left. Who wants to be involved in a religion where there's a long list of difficult things that you have to do that no one knows why, and they're very hard, and that's period. That's the end of it. Okay, what is a mitzvah? We know from all of our discussions over the years that mitzvah comes from the word mitzvot, which means to connect. And we know that mitzvot are opportunities for connection. Hashem created mankind with the purpose of connecting to him. The Almighty, the infinite creator, created us so we can have a relationship with him. God doesn't need us. He doesn't have needs. He created us for our own good, for our own pleasure, so we can have a relationship. But in order to have the relationship, we have to be able to choose the relationship, because if it's under duress, it's not a relationship. So Hashem gave us mitzvahs, 248 positive commandments, 365 prohibitions, and told us, here you go. Here's the book. Now it's up to you to choose. Do you want the relationship? Do you not want the relationship? And guess what? It's not all or nothing. You invest here, a little bit here. You do one mitzvah, we're closer. You do another mitzvah, the relationship has increased in quality. So if we understand that that's what the mitzvahs are, that the mitzvahs are diamonds, they're opportunities for creating eternal connection to our Creator. They're not a burden. They're for us. They're an incredible opportunity. That, I believe, is the theme of Parsha Beha'Alotcha. That mitzvahs are precious opportunities, a privilege that the Am HaNivchar, that the chosen people have been given. You know, the non-Jews have 7 mitzvahs. We have 613. And every day we say, Hashem, thank you for not making me not Jewish. Because if I was a Gentile, I'd only have 7 mitzvahs to do. Now that I'm Jewish, I have 613 opportunities to come closer to you all the time. Okay, so how does this play into our Parsha? Think about the Menorah. Aaron, do you know what the princes brought? They brought a silver bowl, a silver basin, a gold ladle, young bull, rams, 65 sheep, 5 rams, 6 goats. Do you know what it was an incredible investment that they brought from their own money. And Aaron got out of it. Aaron lucked out. He didn't have to pay for anything. He got out of the building fund for the year. He got out of the annual campaign. And what does he say? He's bummed. He's missing out. Why? Because Aaron understands that a mitzvah is not a burden. A mitzvah is a unique opportunity to connect to Hashem. And he felt like he missed that opportunity. That's part 1. Passover Take 2. What's that all about? I always say, imagine if someone gave you a card, a get out of Pesach free card. But this year, you don't have to make Pesach. That's it. You're exempt. You don't have to clean the house. You don't have to buy all the food. You don't have to make a Seder. You wouldn't jump on it? Okay? So here we are. These people are in the desert. They were exempt from participating in Passover offering that year. And what do they say? Lama Nigara, why should we miss out? What are you talking about? This is an opportunity. Passover, the mitzvos, chance to get closer to Hashem. We're not looking for an out over here. We're all in. We want to be part of this. Why should we lose out? Because we were involved in doing another mitzvah of carrying the bones of Joseph, or tending to the needs of a body that hadn't been buried. And now we're going to miss out on a mitzvah? Again, beautiful, beautiful concept. Okay? And then what happens? A whole brand new mitzvah comes about in the Torah that wasn't going to exist otherwise. And it comes about not through Moshe, not through Hashem directly, but through these individuals. And we find out that there's a second chance, an opportunity. We don't see second chances in every mitzvah, but this particular mitzvah, you get a second chance because it came from the burning desire of these individuals to be able to participate in the mitzvah. And finally, the nuns. The nuns, what's going on? The Jewish people are standing at the foot of Mount Sinai. Every single moment they're receiving more commandments, more mitzvahs. How do you look at that? Are they burdensome? Oh no, not another one, not another. Oh no, Shabbos. Oh gosh. Oh no, kosher. Oh, family purity. Wow, this is getting too much. Stop. And then Hashem says travel, and they're like, let's go, like a tinok barech and b'sas sefer, like a child leaving school. That's not the correct attitude of mitzvahs. That's not how it's supposed to be. So over here, we see the exact opposite. We see that they had the wrong attitude about mitzvahs. When it came time to leave the sea, they didn't want to go because they were raking it in materially and physically. But when it comes time to leave the mountain, they're ready to go. So we see this idea in the opposite when it comes to the story of leaving the mountain of Hashem. And when the Jewish people complain about not having food, they complain about the mun. We have to eat this garbage called mun. In Egypt, we had food for free. And Rashi says, food for free? What are you talking about? Pharaoh didn't even give them straw to build their bricks for free. So Rashi says free of mitzvos, meaning there was no spiritual obligation. They didn't have to wash, they didn't have to bench, they didn't have to keep kosher, all the laws. And now their bread and their sustenance depend on their mitzvah performance. Before, they didn't have to perform mitzvahs. They're complaining they miss the old days when they would get their bread for free of spiritual burden. Also, an example of the wrong attitude to have towards mitzvahs. So I believe that that is the theme that unifies much of Parshas Beha'Alotcha. And with that, I'm going to give everybody an opportunity to chime in and feel free to ask questions, make comments, and